I'd like you to turn to the book of Acts. We've been dealing with Acts, Acts chapter 10. I'm going to start with verse 9. As something happens. About noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. Let me get back there. But I got a couple images to show you. So, this is a town called Jaffa, or we know it as Joppa in English usually. That's what it's used, but it's Jaffa. It's our resident Hebrew man. We need to work it out. But anyway, I got to get John up here, and he can translate for me. But the thing is it's just on the edge of Tel Aviv, just to the west, and a little north, a little south of Tel Aviv, right off of the Mediterranean. This is the city, and as you come into the Jaffa, this is kind of the look of it. Take a look here. It's 3 shots together. There's an area where there's a beautiful archway behind where the camera is. And then we start going through these little streets. And I don't have a picture of it here, but I always love when we go to Jaffa, we'll see there's a planter where the tree is hanging with three different wires, this heavy tree hanging there. And they always have to water it, but it's beautiful. Jaffa is a wonderful little city and a little town. Well, it's city. I mean, I was able to get it with not many people walking around in this shot because it was early in the morning on that Israel trip we were doing. And so you start going down some of the city streets and take a look at this. You see the rooftop? See the rooftop places there? If you've been to the Middle East, you know rooftops. I remember Anna and I, in March, we went to Istanbul, and everybody has a rooftop restaurant. Have you ever been there? Rooftop restaurants, and you see St. Sophia over here, Bosphorus, the Bosphorus, which is the water pathway between the 2 continents, Asia on one side, Europe on the other, and you get to see this. And it's beautiful. You look at the different things because that's what the rooftop is there for. You look out, and especially if you have nice weather and it's warm and the sea breezes are flowing. Jaffa's much the same way. You have a place where you can get up on the roof. And in fact, take a look here. I love it here. The Zakarian family. I wonder what background is this Zakarian. You know, that's the Armenian, the Ian, always at the end. Sometimes a Y-A-N or I-A-N. But Ian, you say, well, I'm not Aitken, I'm Aitken. Now I'm Armenian. All right. But the thing is, just kidding. This is where all my Armenian brothers and sisters are, wait, Pastor John, what? Wait, what? But the Zakarian family who has this place, and it's the house of Simon the tanner. What's a tanner? How we always think about tanning. You know how people put that tanning lotion on to make themselves look, how it is? In the ancient world, no one wanted a tan. They wanted to hide inside because that was the symbol of being rich. You don't have to work outside, right? But then we come to today where everybody wants to be a little more tan. And I don't believe we've got all this color thing. I think a lot of us, if it wasn't for politics, would be colorblind because the darker skin is more tall, dark, and handsome. Ever heard of that? Anyway, but the thing is the tanner is you're tanning these skins. And I can imagine the smell of the leather of Simon the tanner. And have you ever been in a leather shop? Over down in El Monte, you got a couple leather shops that are really cool. I used to go take a look and get some good pricing, In Mexico, you'll see some good tanning shops. Can I buy a holster so I can look like I'm Clint Eastwood? Never mind. But anyway, but the thing is the tanner, he's busy working. And Peter he went up as he was waiting for food. Let's keep reading here. So he was hungry, verse 10 in Acts chapter 10, verse 10. He was hungry and he wanted something to eat. He was hungry and he wanted something to eat. Well, that's not something to eat, but there's Anna and JD as we're there in Jaffa. Let's take a look at what we were looking at. Look at that, beautiful. But even though it's beautiful out there, if you're hungry, it's time to eat. But something is going to surprise Peter. You know, Peter's thinking about something delicious like maybe a little lamb or some hummus, right? Maybe some, I don't know, baba ganoush or something yummy he's looking forward to. And all of a sudden, something happens. He's there, and he went into a trance. A trance, meaning a vision. He saw heaven opening up, and something like a large sheet of all kinds of four-footed animals. I love that, four-footed. There's a lot of four-footed animals out there, as well as reptiles and birds. And a voice came to him. It said, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Well, we're Seventh-day Adventists, so we're supposed to ignore this part of the Bible, right? No, we don't ignore it. Or do we, or don't we? I know that I remember as, when I was a young pastor, I remember that we were having some kind of little debate thing in Forest Grove, Oregon. And one of the pastors was saying that, you know, you can absolutely eat anything out there. We Seventh-day Adventists are like, no, we follow the Levitical laws, right? Well, actually, we don't completely follow the Levitical laws because, you know, there's some things, I mean, we're not supposed to cut the hair here, you know, and we're not supposed to wear cloth that's two different types. But we as Seventh-day Adventists believe that the health principles came to us, and actually there's a thought process. God said don't do it, so we don't do it, and that's really the real reason. You know, we can say health, but, you know, a lot of things are so-called healthy that maybe aren't the greatest. But yet at the same time, God said to go and kill these, all kinds of animals and eat them? And Peter has an answer just like Pastor John would, right? I said, whoa, wait a minute. Surely not, Lord, Peter replied. I have never eaten anything impure or unclean. Then verse 15, the voice from heaven spoke to him a second time, do not call anything impure that God has made what? Clean. So that means we can eat absolutely anything, right? Well, to understand this, we have to go backward about 24 hours ago. Over in a place called Caesarea Maritime. There's two Caesareas over there. There's Philippi and there's Maritime. Maritime, who here has been to Caesarea Maritime? It's a beautiful. By the way, who here has a kitchen where you have Caesar stone on your counter? I know that Caesar stone, or actually they call it a different thing because Caesar stone is a coined, copyrighted, because it's from Caesarea, Caesar stone. And when you're there at Caesarea, you can see a big factory where they're dragging out of the ground this quartz, which is incredibly hard. They heat it up and they meld it together and make it. And in fact, in the kitchen that we have in the fellowship hall, it's quartz because it's very strong. It's impervious to much. You You can have things that are sticky or whatever. It doesn't get inside. And that comes from Caesar stone. And then in China, they copied it and call it quartz instead of Caesar stone. But I always think about it as Caesar stone. But just off the edge of Caesar stone, here is an ancient mosaic. You ever see a mosaic before? I love that word mosaic. It mixes things together. And these animals you can see. This is one of the earliest Christian communities that is in the old area of Israel. So there are some places that we know are old ancient Christian sites. Right there, Caesarea Maritime. In fact, that camera shot there, you can see the Mediterranean. This is a location where early Christians were. Let me read. Going to go backwards. Acts chapter 10, verse 1. At Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius. He was a centurion in what was known as the Italian regiment. Italiano. He liked the spaghetti, right? You know how it is. There's different regiments. You know, of course, that Pilate, Pilate? He was Spaniard. He wasn't Italian. He was Spaniard. And, but this guy was in the Italian regiment, which means that they enjoy eating lots of spaghetti. Sorry. I like spaghetti too. All right. So, he's in the Italian regiment. You guys are supposed to laugh. It's like, is everyone alive here? All right, so anyway, then you laugh. Thank you. It's really sad when someone has to say, please laugh. All right, never mind. I'll never be on Netflix. All right, so, and so verse 2, he and all of his family were devout, God-fearing. He gave generously to those who were in need, and he prayed to God regularly. You mean he was not Jewish? He was not Hebrew, but yet he prayed to the God that is an eternal God? Not just to the gods, but God. Actual God. And uncircumcised. And I'm not going to get into it right now. But the whole circumcision thing is a big deal. Because you have to understand this text. You know how there's this argument of circumcision? Okay. The argument of circumcision has to do with Abraham. Abraham was told by God that he must be circumcised in all the children. I'm not going to get into the reason why, but it's very real. It has to do with a blessing of the children and this constant. And the seed, he was promised that there would be a seed. Jesus eventually would come, a seed that would save the world. Okay, so now we have this situation where the Jewish people at the time of Jesus, the Hebrews, they were saved by being Jewish, by being Hebrew. They kept the law so that they could be a child of Abraham, because it is through Abraham that the blessings come to the world and to them. But the Gentiles, or the Goy, the ones who are not circumcised and not children of Abraham, they are on the outside. They're outsiders. So the reason why we keep the law as a Hebrew is so that we are Hebrews, so that when God saves Hebrews and the children of Abraham, we will be saved. Do you see that? It's not personal between God and us. It is personal between you and your people staying in the group. Whether through the laws of Leviticus or the social laws or the Ten Commandments. It's all intermingled. But God has an interesting message here for all of us today. I'm going to keep reading here. Already, I'm looking at the time, and I'm getting in trouble. All right, let's continue on. So, verse 4, Verse 3, one day about 3 in the afternoon, he had a vision. He distinctly saw an angel of God who came to him, and he said, Cornelius. Verse 4, are you with me? Cornelius stared at him in fear. What is it, Lord? He asked. The angel answered, your prayers and gifts to the poor have come up as a memorial offering before God. Verse 5. Now send men to Jaffa to bring back a man named Simon. It wasn't Simon the tanner. Interestingly enough, it was Simon the Peter, right? Right? With Simon the tanner, whose house is by the sea. Verse 7. When the angel who spoke to him had gone, Cornelius called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier who was one of his attendants. And he told them everything that happened, and he sent them to Jaffa. So it's 3 in the afternoon. It's probably, maybe by the time he calls, there were maybe 5 in the afternoon. So the guys head on the road, but they're not sure where the place is, so they start to travel. Now, by car from Caesarea Maritime to Jaffa, it's about 25 minutes. If you're going about 60, 50 miles an hour, something like that. It's not that far, but it's also not that close. So they started heading off, and by the morning, they had probably found a place to stay there. And then they start looking for, maybe they got there, maybe they went all night. I don't know, because if you're on the back of horses, you're not going to rush. You're going to go at a good pace so you don't get tired immediately. So they headed there, and the day afterward is the time when Peter had that vision. So now I'm going to ask you to move down in the text again. This is Acts chapter 10, verse 17. You remember that the sheet that came down with all these animals in it? All these very interesting characters, even the serpents, and all these different things sitting in there. And God said, go, kill, and eat. And Peter says, I never do that ever since I was a child. And God says, what I have made clean, don't call them unclean. After 3 times this happened, 1, 2, 3, it says here now in verse 17, while Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision, the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was and stopped at the gate. They then called out asking if Simon, who is known as Peter, was staying there. Verse 19. This is kind of interesting. An angel told his name to uncircumcised non-Hebrews that are not a part of the promises of God, it seems. And yet, the angel talks to them. Now, you know that, though, if you've read the Bible, you will find that even guys like Nebuchadnezzar, Cyrus, you'll find that there are many. In fact, I think you guys were talking about Rahab today. Rahab, right? She is someone that was not a part of the Hebrews, but you know what? She was a part of the birth of Jesus. God is very interesting. He sets rules, and then he decides when to break his own rules. But it's never actually truly breaking the rules. It's a larger tapestry, a larger mosaic that he's creating. He hasn't asked us to break the rules. He is the one that has the ability to do such because he knows the end from the beginning, as we do not. He called for Cornelius to reach out to Simon Peter, and these men arrive amazingly right at the time when Peter's asking what it means. He's saying, does that mean I can have some ham hocks now? I want some snake steak. Do you think he said that? I don't know. God is giving a very real message. Let's continue to read and see what this message is. So, they called out, verse 19, while Peter was still thinking about the wisdom, the Spirit said to him, how do you like that? The Spirit of God speaks to him. Simon, 3 men are looking for you. Get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate. Go with them, for I have sent them. Now, let me get into this real quick. You have to have the Spirit say that to him. This has to happen. You know why? Because according to the tradition of the Hebrews, you don't walk into an uncircumcised person's house. You don't enter their premises. In fact, we have this at the time of Jesus. Jesus was hauled into the praetorium where Pilate was, making him ceremonially unclean, where Caiaphas and the high priests were all outside, trying to stay ceremonially clean. So Peter entering someone's house is a no-go. But if the Spirit says, kill and eat, he says, I'm not going to do it. God says, if I have made them clean, how dare you call them unclean? These men, though uncircumcised, according to Paul, were circumcised in the heart. Because by faith we become children of Abraham. Cornelius knew all along what he was called to do. He just didn't know it. I know that sounds weird. He knew all along what to do. He just didn't know it. Have you ever had something like that? Where you knew something was right, but you just didn't realize it? I know there's people that I have studied with, and they'll say, I remember, Raul was one of them, Raul online. Raul, one of them where it's like, he says, you know, Pastor, I got to talk to you about this thing. I'm not sure about this. So we were talking before his baptism, and I went through the issue he'd brought up, and he said, you know what, Pastor? I knew that was right. I just hadn't thought about it. It was one of those things. Now, Raul, I might be mischaracterizing, but actually, that is heard over and over by those of us who are pastors. I didn't know, but I knew. Somehow I knew it was right, but I don't know why I didn't know it. It's kind of like the second touch with Jesus. A guy comes and he's healed, but it doesn't really see totally. Jesus touches him a second time, and they no longer look like trees. They look like people. We all have a second touch. He calls us. He calls all of us. Do you know that he calls people in India that are Hindu? He calls Thais in Thailand who are Buddhists. He calls Middle Eastern people from like Saudi Arabia who are Muslim. You know he calls them. He calls everyone. And he even calls some of us Seventh-day Adventists to be a part of his real faith. Faith in something that is no longer about where we were born or what skin color we have, but to be insiders to the real family of God. The family of God that crosses over those borders. Human borders are wonderful. They're nice. Countries have to have borders, okay? If you don't have borders, you don't have a country, right? But I'm not saved by my country. Jesus loves all our countries, but he didn't die for a country. He died for you. He died for people. Countries, names is for tombstones, baby, but Jesus died for you and for me. And for Cornelius. Here, I want you to see the water. Look at this. This is Caesarea. If you look on the left-hand side, there's where the Caesar stone comes from. Look at that amazing water. On that day, it was choppy when we were there. It oftentimes is on the Mediterranean. And there's where Pilate's stone is, where you can see his signature on there. And then we can see over here the Hippodrome, the place where Paul was kept during the time when he was there before Felix and Festus. It was these waters that then when he came into Cornelius' house, he said that the Lord told me that I should no longer make decisions based on whether someone's circumcised or not. I make decisions based on faith. Powerful. And he baptized Cornelius. And how many? His entire family. This was Anna, is in a family, the Godoy family, where mommy and daddy were going to be baptized, and then the kids, man, all the way through. I think Anna was pretty young. It was only Checha that wasn't baptized in that time. But right there at the beach, just like this family, boom, the whole family went down, man, for Jesus. So it says here in verse 25, let's see here. Verse 25, Peter entered the house. Cornelius met him, and it fell at his feet in reverence. Verse 26, Peter made him get up. Stand up. I'm only a man myself. Verse 27, talking with him, Peter went inside, found a large gathering of people. Verse 28, you are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate or visit a Gentile, but God has shown me. Do you see this? I should not call anyone, what? Impure or unclean. Did you hear that? Uh-oh. Now we're grinding, aren't we? Because we, as human beings, always have the insiders and the outsiders. We have those that have the skin color that doesn't match ours. Maybe those with things that they do that we don't agree with. Is it up to us to say they're impure? Let God deal with it. Look at that beautiful water. My friends, God calls everyone to be in his kingdom. At church, when we're here, I don't see church as a place where a bunch of families get together and just kind of like hang out as buds. Church is supposed to be evangelistic, meaning I would love if I had 90% of the church that aren't believers, because this is where they need to be, so that we can be family as Jesus brings us together. If Jesus, in his fire, and this is what I love, in the museum I got this, where you have the fire above the sanctuary. If the fire of Jesus is burning, I know it's not like burning that, I'm getting figuratively, right? This is symbolic. When the fire of Jesus is burning in his church, those who do not want Jesus will go away fast. But those who want to be near him, my job is not to push them out. My job is to say, you know what? There's someone that might look unclean, but according to Jesus, I treat them like they're clean, because what I have made clean, Jesus says, do not call unclean. Are you with me? Powerful. By the way, Peter ran into a buzzsaw. Peter ran into a buzzsaw on this. And in fact, I'm going to read it real quick here. I know we're getting near the end here, but it's chapter 11. As he gets called in by the conference president there at the early Christian church and says, what are you doing, right? Verse 4, starting from the beginning, Peter told them the whole story. Verse 5, I was in the city of Joppa in a trance, you know, in this whole story, and he said, "Go, get up, kill, and eat." I replied, "Surely, Lord, nothing impure has entered my mouth." Verse 9, the voice spoke from heaven a second time, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." This happened 3 times. Then he goes on down. He says, verse 15, as I began to speak, the Holy Spirit came on them, Cornelius, and the uncircumcised came on them, and they had entered at us at the beginning. Verse 16, then I remembered what the Lord had said. John baptized with water, but you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit. So if God gave them the same gift as us who believed in the Lord Jesus, who was I to think that I could stand in God's way? Did you hear that? We got to wake up today. Man, I love this. You know, in John chapter 10, I'm just going to read it. If you want to go with me, you can, because we're almost at the end here. Chapter 10 of John, Jesus says in verse 11, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired man is not the shepherd. He doesn't own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, what happens? He runs. He runs away. The wolf attacks the flock and it scatters." Verse 13, the man runs away because he's a hired man. Are you a hired person for Jesus, or are you one of his sheep? He doesn't care about the sheep. Verse 14, "I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep. My sheep know me, just as the Father knows me. And I know the Father, and I lay down my life for my sheep. I have," verse 16, read this. This is very important. "I have other sheep that are not in the sheep pen, but I must bring them also. And they too will listen to my voice. And they will hear and be one flock and one shepherd." Did you hear that? During this week, when you see people on the road that you're so angry about, I'm the same. When you see people that drive you nuts and they're at the store and they don't know how to move forward, or maybe they're just plain jerks to you, remember, God calls them too. Even if they're Satanists and they're narcissists and they're messed up in multiple different ways, remember, you are messed up in multiple different ways. "They are not of my sheep pen," or this sheep pen, he said, "but I will go find them, and we will have one shepherd with one people." Every time you see someone this week, and for every week following, remember, they're only a future Seventh-day Adventist. God bless you all.